Sampling, Unit 1, Part 2. Random sampling is the process of using chance to select individuals from a population to be included in the sample. A sample of size n from a population of size N is obtained through simple random sampling if every possible sample of size n has an equally likely chance of occurring. The sample is then called a simple random sample. So that equally likely chance of occurring is very important. Suppose a study group consists of 5 students: Bob, Patricia, Mike, Jan, and Maria. 2 of the students must go to the board to demonstrate a homework problem. List all possible samples of size 2 without replacement. Without replacement means once you pick a person, they cannot be picked again. That seems obvious here because a student couldn't go to the board with himself. The Powerball lottery is another without replacement experiment. If they put a ball back in once it was drawn, the chances of winning would be even more dismal than they already are. Putting the ball in would be an example of a with replacement experiment. Drawing a sample with replacement means you make a choice, say picking a marble out of an urn, and then put it back in before you pick the next marble. This becomes important when one considers the possible number of all possible samples. There will be lots more if replacement is allowed. So let's go back to our study group. 2 of the students have to go to the board, and we're going to do this without replacement, and I want to list all the possible samples of size 2. So I need some sort of a system to make sure I don't leave anybody out. So let's start with Bob. We can pair Bob with Patricia, with Mike, with Jan, and with Maria. So we've gone down the list. Next, let's go with Patricia. She's already paired with Bob. So we take the next person and pair her with Mike, and then Patricia with Jan, and then Patricia with Maria. Now Patricia's up there with everybody she could possibly go with. Bob is up there with everybody he could possibly go with. So let's move on to Mike. Pair Mike with Jan because he's already up there with Bob and he's already up there with Patricia. And then we can pair him with Maria, and those are the only other possibilities that he can be paired with. Then move on to Jan. She's already up there with everybody except Maria. So the last pair is Jan and Maria. So that gives us a total of 10 possible samples of size 2 from those 5 students. The steps for obtaining a simple random sample. Obtain a frame that lists all the individuals in the population of interest. Then number the individuals in the frame from 1 to n, to whatever they are. Then you use a random number table, a graphing calculator, or most commonly statistical software to randomly generate n numbers where n is the desired sample size. In actuality, you just tell the software to generate the sample and it goes ahead and pairs the numbers with the people and just spits out, or the individuals, and just spits out your sample for you. But you need to know how the process happens. So with the small number of students, where we're picking our sample of 2 students from the previous group of 5 to go to the board, the solution would be to first put the students in a numbered list. So we just let Bob be number 1, Patricia number 2, Mike number 3, Jan number 4, and Maria number 5. Now we don't have a random number generator, but since we only have 5 people, a die is going to work nicely. And by the way, die is the singular of dice. So we'll roll it once, and we'll pick the person beside the number you roll. If you get a 6, you just roll again. So you roll again to get the second person. If you get 6 or the number you rolled the first time, roll again. Then choose the person beside the number you rolled. There are programs in software and calculators that will generate longer lists of random numbers. There are also tables of random numbers that can be used to create a random sample. Our small sample should give you the idea of how it's done on a larger scale. And it's always a good idea to know how the technology works before you just turn your life over to it. Here's another example. The 110th Congress of the United States had 435 members in the House of Representatives. Explain how to conduct a simple random sample of 5 members to attend a presidential luncheon. So the first thing we do is have a list of all the members of Congress in a numbered list from 1 to 435. And most of you have used an Excel or some kind of spreadsheet. That would be pretty easy to number a list of 435 people. Then use technology or a random number generator table to get 5 random numbers between 1 and 435 inclusive, meaning that you also want to include the 1 and the 435. The names beside those numbers in your list would be the representatives who get to attend. Here's an example of some bad samples. A convenience sample is an example of a sample that is not random. The individuals in the sample are chosen because they are convenient. Our earlier example of visiting Chinatown was a convenience sample because we sampled the first 100 women we ran into in Chinatown. It's bad because most of them will likely be Asian. There may also be other characteristics they have in common, such as being on the street at the same time of day, which might influence our study. A convenience sample is one in which the individuals in the sample are easily obtained, hence the word convenience. Any studies that use this type of sampling generally have results that are suspect. Results should be looked upon with extreme skepticism. So when you're reading a study and you notice that the way they chose their sample was a convenient sample, you might want to save your time and not read it. Another issue in samples is bias. If the results of the sample are not representative of the population, then the sample has bias. There are 3 sources of bias: sampling bias, which would have happened in our Chinatown example, non-response bias, and response bias. Sampling bias means that the technique used to obtain the individuals to be in the sample tended to favor one part of the population over another. In our San Francisco example, we were favoring the Asian women population. Undercoverage is a type of sampling bias. Undercoverage occurs when the proportion of one segment of the population is lower in the sample than it is in the population. Non-response bias exists when individuals selected to be in the sample who do not respond to the survey have different opinions from those who do. Non-response bias can be improved through the use of callbacks or rewards and incentives. Non-response bias is a real problem in student course evaluations because usually only the people who respond are the ones who are really happy or the ones who are really not happy. Types of response bias. There can be interviewer error, misrepresented answers. Words used in survey questions can cause response bias. The order of the questions or the words within the question can cause response bias. So interviewer error would be the way the interviewer asks the questions can influence how the person answers. This might include facial expressions, gestures, voice tone, having an accent, or anything that might make an influence on the way the person interprets or answers the question. Often we do this without even thinking, so to do proper interviewing techniques requires some training. Misrepresented answers occurs when people exaggerate or out and out lie when they respond. Examples of questions that might have misrepresented answers would be, how much do you weigh? How many people do you know would not give a true response to that question? How many sit-ups can you do? Same thing. What's your age? Words that you use in a survey question can also cause response bias. The way questions are worded can influence how the person answers. This might include using words certain ethnic groups might interpret differently. It might also include using complicated language that is not typically understood by those being interviewed. And rather than admit they don't know what you're talking about, they'll just give you a random answer. Some examples. Do you favor or oppose a minor increase in property tax to ensure fair salaries for teachers and properly equipped school buildings? The italicized words make it pretty clear whoever wrote this question is in favor of the tax increase, because who wouldn't want to increase teacher salaries and properly equip the school buildings? The order of the questions, or the words within the question, can influence how the person answers. Respondents tend to choose early choices. We have short attention spans. One way to avoid this bias is to order the choices differently on the surveys so they aren't all in the same order. Now complete the assessment on sampling that follows this presentation. The password you need to enter for this assessment is sample in all lowercase. Note that assessments are supposed to be taken in one sitting, even though the instructions are going to tell you have a save for later option. That is only there to hopefully keep you from losing work if you have an internet problem. The assessments are timed, but you can continue if the timer runs out. However, we'll have a discussion if that timer records time into the next day.